Hey guys, welcome to Martial Mentality, a podcast that's inspired by the martial arts. Today I have with me,
Nathaniel Pham of the Northern Shaolin School of Kung Fu and one of his students.
how long you been training, Nate?
About 7.5 years now, almost 8.
And also I have,
Bobby Elliott, and I've been training here for a little over 2 years.
and of course, my name is Sifu Delmar. I've been training for about 21 years now, and I'm the head instructor here at the Northern Shaolin School of Kung Fu. And today we're going to talk about preparing for competition. Guys, well, before I do that, also make sure you like, share, subscribe, comment on YouTube. You can find us on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram. Just look up the Northern Shaolin School of Kung Fu. So back to our topic, preparing for competition. I'm going to start with you, Nathaniel.
Yes, sir.
Nate, why is it important to compete?
So, competing in the sport aspect of Kung Fu, it's important to compete because you can show. Now, I'm not saying like this is for super practical purposes, but you can show your dedication to the art and your prowess or just the cleanliness of your movements in competition. And it also allows you to gauge your skill level with other similarly matched opponents or other people who are competing within your level.
What about you, Bobby? Why is it important to compete?
Excuse me. I agree with Nate a lot on that. I think it also gives you a chance to not just show what you've learned, but see what other people from other schools have learned. And, we get used to going against and seeing our classmates all the time. So it gives you a different viewpoint of, we learn each other,
Mhm.
especially in sparring. We learn each other a lot easier than we do a stranger. So it gives you a test of, I don't know what this person's going to do. And it gives you that, I guess, that more confidence, being able to go out there in front of people, in front of judges, and just kind of show what you can do.
So I think it's important to compete because it's a great arena for students to, like both of you said, you get to gauge your skill against somebody that's not a classmate. Also, I think it gives the added aspect of pressure.
Mm.
And so sometimes in martial art, what we don't realize is when we're in fighting situations, let's take it from a practicality standpoint, there's that pressure, and competing helps you deal with pressure in certain ways. So, Nate, how do you deal with the pressure of competition? What's something that you do in order to kind of help you deal with that aspect? Because I'm sure there's nerve-wracking to get in there in front of all these people that are your peers or, mentors and things like that and perform and put yourself on a platform like that.
So, me personally, after all of the competitions I've been to, the best way for me to get over all of these people watching me in this stage fright pressure is simply don't think about other people watching you. Do the form, if you're doing a form, for example, or presenting one, do a form and do it as if you're on a battlefield, for example, or you want to do it with the intent of hurting someone. And the reason I say this is because if you're focusing on the real intent of the form, you're not worried about the perception of other people, which could affect your performance. So I feel like if you simply do the form as intended in the way it was taught, you don't have to worry about other people watching you.
That's good advice. What about you, Bobby?
Um, for me, it's a little more nerve wracking just because I'm still a beginner, and like, even the few competitions, you get up there and your heart's beating, and for me, it's easier when I actually don't know the people judging me.
Mhm.
When it's you guys, I get more nervous because I feel like I should be better,
Mhm.
or like y'all are going to notice all the things I do wrong. Whereas those judges and other competitors, they don't know what I'm about to do.
Mhm.
I also like to, almost depending on what the form is, get into a rhythm or like almost like a dance to it, because then I can just kind of zone out and just be in my head and not really worry about, oh my God, there's like this person and that person looking at me. Cause most of the times nobody's looking at you except the people judging you. And there's so many people at these competitions that if you're so worried about who's staring at who, you're just going to mess up.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. If your focus is off, you will not perform up to your potential. I think for me, it can still be nerve-wracking to judge. It can still be nerve-wracking to be in the middle of a sparring ring, because even though those two people are competing, you're still on display too if you're the one refereeing the match. So you have to think of it in that respect too, even though I may not be necessarily sometimes in there competing, and I obviously still compete too, so I could talk about it from that aspect, but maybe from a judge's standpoint or a referee standpoint, there's still the pressure of ensuring that you make the right calls, that you keep the competitors safe, that you are making sure that, you know, whoever's in the ring or whoever's watching you, sometimes you have to explain things to the crowd. They don't understand. So I've had to do all of those things. And then from the actual competing portion, now I think of it more or less, I'm going to go have fun and just learn. I'm not going to focus so much on I have to win, I have to win, I have to win. Because at the end of the day, you can get all the medals and trophies and everything like that. And, you know, if you get an altercation on the street or something happens, I mean, all of that stuff goes out the window. It's not really important. However, you know, competition is fun and it's something that you should do. And I think, you know, anybody who, you know, does martial arts should compete in some way, shape, or form. And that's why we encourage it here at the Northern Shaolin School of Kung Fu. So, Bobby, back to you real quick. You said you were a beginner. So what are some of the things that you can give as far as advice to people who are new to tournaments or new to martial arts? How should they prepare? What should they look for? And maybe do you have any recommendation on tournaments that they can go and compete at?
So I've done 2 tournaments as far as competing. There was I think it was CACMA in the spring, and then Quoshu up in Baltimore. And CACMA was my first tournament, and oh God, I was so nervous. I was so nervous. And like practice, like to where it's almost like instinct, you know, to where you don't have to. I mean, the form especially practice. Sparring, sparring's a little bit different because, you know, everything's just go, 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 go. I think CACMA is continuous sparring, whereas Quoshu was point sparring. Point sparring, you're done in, you know, could be 20 seconds that you're done, if even it lasts that, whereas continuous sparring, you're 3 rounds. And if you don't practice, all your skill will just go out the window. And then with that, it was good to perform first at a smaller tournament because it got all those nerves out of the way. But I was also there with a lot of the schoolmates and a lot of people that, you know, we've met through this school as more of the local Charlotte tournament. And it was nice to feel at home, sort of. Whereas with Quoshu, there are schools from all over, and there are some of the top name schools that bring a huge tournament team. And it almost feels like the Super Bowl of tournaments because there's so many people there. But it's such an amazing experience because you get to see so many competitors from all over, and you get to make a lot of new friends. And with that one, I wasn't as nervous because, you know, I've been in a tournament before. And I found myself, you know, when you're waiting in the hall for your event to be called, and I'm watching these other people do their forms, and I'm like, wow, she's really good. Wow, she's really good. You almost have to put that out of your head and go in there and just focus, do the best you can for you. Don't worry about them other people, because all of that's going to go out the window once you get in there and it's time to go. And if you do the best you can, hopefully you'll come out on top. And I was very, very lucky that I did. Well, I don't want to say I'm lucky, but it was a nice surprise for me to go out there and compete against 10 or 11 other women and win. I was so scared and so nervous because it was just you're so far away from home and it feels like you're in a different world. And then when you go in there and just put your heart on the line and you come out on top, you're like, holy crap. It just, it's a good experience to elevate your confidence so that you come back and work even harder to the next tournament. And my next tournament, if I compete again or when I compete again, I'll be in the intermediate level. So that means I have to even step up even further.
And that's a great segue because Nathaniel, you have competed on the intermediate, excuse me, and you've also competed on the advanced level at both a regional tournament and at an international tournament. Can you tell us about your experience and how you can prepare as an intermediate competitor as opposed to an advanced competitor for, even, we talked about CACMA, which there's the Queen Charlotte's Cup that's usually happens in the Charlotte area in the springtime. And there's also the Fall Classic that happens in October in the Charlotte area. So, and if you look on our website, sometimes you can find information about that, or if you look online, you can find information about those tournaments. And also Quoshu, which is a huge international tournament that happens in Baltimore, Maryland, usually at the end of July. That is, like Bobby said, it's like the Super Bowl of tournaments. It's huge, and it's a great place to go and compete against some of the best martial artists literally in the world.
Mhm.
So, but Nate, so what do you think about as far as, preparing as an intermediate and advanced competitor?
So in my experience as an intermediate competitor, I would say that right now your focus would be on the very quality of your handwork and your stance work together. And you want to start dabbling into the real intent of the form if you're doing forms competition, for example. And I say this because in the beginner division, this is simply your foundations and it's mostly concerning stances with a little bit of handwork. But intermediate is where you need to step up your game a little bit because you're at a point now where you're beyond the very fundamentals and you need to start integrating more other concepts into your kung fu. So, as an intermediate, I believe that you should be you should still be working the physical aspects of your forms in kung fu, but start thinking about the practical real world applications of your forms and what the original intent behind them was. And as for sparring, um, now you could come across a wide variety of different styles and experiences, especially because, it depends on what tournament you go to. But for intermediate sparring, um, especially because of the rules too, they can change depending on the tournament and whatnot. But for intermediate sparring, I think you should be varying combos more or start integrating what works best for you, especially based on your matchup. Like if you're a much shorter person against a much taller person, then you could be taking advantage of grappling or short strikes, staying in the pocket and whatnot. So overall, for an intermediate competitor, you should be thinking more strategically instead of just the basics. Now, leading into advanced, you're not necessarily worried about the very quality of your stance work or your hand work because those should be on par already because you're at a level now where you should be able to self maintain. This is the part where you need to know what you're doing. Your eyes should be facing where you're going. You should know what techniques you're performing, and the judges should be able to see that too. They'll be able to look at your body language and see where you're transferring power, where you're striking, and whatnot. And as for sparring, this is where people can get very competitive, especially with a few matches I've had in the past, or sometimes it gets heated really quickly. Like how I've a couple of matches have ended early for me because we some competitors have been disqualified. So in this bracket, you would want to play to your strengths, but you need to pick and choose your shots carefully, especially if you're maybe not as stamina based as other people are. So, for example, I'm not very good about stamina, which is something I should be training more, especially for tournaments and whatnot. But I should be playing for precision strikes, grappling, or big definitive I know I hit the moves, things like that. Because if you start throwing strikes willy nilly, nothing's gonna land, nothing's gonna be clean. So you, as the advanced martial artist, should have a higher level of knowledge where you know what you're doing. And so this is also going to translate into your practical applications too, because if you're just flailing your arms around and you don't know what you're doing, then it's not going to be effective in a real confrontation. You should be striking with real intent and you should be knowing what you're doing.
That was good information.
Yeah, because I remember with my first sparring match, it was continuous sparring. And I really love that the judges will come up to you and give you pointers afterwards.
Mhm.
And, they told me that, I was running that ring. I was running her around, but my technique wasn't there. Whereas she wasn't firing off as much like hits or kicks or whatever, but she had better technique.
Right.
She was more picking her shots, whereas I was just flailing my arms, But I can definitely see how that differs from beginner, intermediate to advanced.
Well, I can talk from all of those aspects, and I want to give advice just kind of from an overall standpoint, because as you progress, and Bobby and Nate, both of you gave really good examples of what to do at each level. I think especially for the beginners, like Nate said, and like you said too, foundation. That's the biggest thing I would think of. Foundation is very important for beginner level competition. But if you can go above beginner level, do it. If you have the ability and the skill level to, transpire to be better than that, go for it, because you always want to think about it in this respect. And, one of my teachers kind of taught me this. So, like, when you think about, let's say, like a point system when you're judging people, let's say for a beginner bracket, you have a 6.00 scale to 7.5. Okay. So that's your scale. And for your intermediate, your scale would be maybe 7.00 to 8.5. And then for advanced, your scale would maybe be from, let's say, 8 to 9.5. Okay. Just kind of giving you a scale. So let's take the beginner scale. All right. 6 to 7.5. In between that, you want to score at the minimum between like 6.75 to 7. Okay. That's kind of your average. What you need to try to aim for is you want to be on the higher end of the scoring range of whatever you're doing. So if you can score between 7 to 7.5, you're doing pretty good. Okay. And Nathaniel can tell you that even like in Quoshu, Nathaniel competed in the advanced bracket. And I would definitely want him to talk about his experience, because he was in there with almost 19 to
It was like 20 something.
20 other people.
Huge.
And everybody in there was good. And Nate actually scored relatively well, but in order to place, he had to score at the higher end of his range. And so when you get in competition that can be that heated, little things will set you apart. And it doesn't matter what the bracket is, beginner, intermediate, or advanced. It can be all of them. But you need to make sure that you have all the prerequisite training and ability to make sure that you stand out from a group of people.
I think that's what really helped me at Quoshu, because I was in the beginner bracket with forms with probably 10 or 11 other women, and all of them had really nice forms, very beautiful, very flowy. But what they didn't really have was power.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the biggest compliment that I got from a lot of the judges, was how much power I was able to show. And I think that not just the power, but like the deeper stances I had just kind of set me above
Mm-hmm.
because I went first and I literally set the bar. And it, I think that just display of power was really what won me that. I mean, not to say that I didn't practice and my form wasn't good and all of that stuff, because of course those things contributed, but that was one thing that while watching those other girls, not a lot of them had any power. It was very beautiful, very light, very flowy, but being able to show power with my form, just like you said, just kind of set me above the rest.
Right, you were set apart. And
Mhm.
you also have to think about who your judges are, because sometimes being a judge can be subjective. So you may have had judges that, oh, well, flow is more important to me than
Mm.
power, or stance work is more important to me than this. So,
Yeah, I mean, some judges even look for more technically complicated forms
Yeah.
than the real fundamental parts of the form. So, for example, I've seen forms in my division that have scored pretty high because they have all these fancy kicks like butterfly kicks and rolls and splits and whatnot. But I feel as though some judges have actually scored me higher than those forms, not because my form was as technically complicated as those forms, but just because I put more power and intent and I'm sure footed. I know where I'm stepping and what
Mm.
I'm doing. And as a result, I'm actually managing to score either on par or maybe just a little bit below those forms because I'm doing what I'm doing instead of throwing out all these very advanced techniques.
Mm.
and so, and you're right. So, when you get to more intermediate and advanced tournaments, you're going to see more advanced techniques like Nate's talking about from a forms category portion. And you'll see it in sparring too, because you're going to start seeing people use more aggressive strategy.
Mm.
So, and it can be whatever you're doing. When you get on that advanced level, everybody is usually skilled in some way, shape, or form. Nobody's usually a scrub. You have to respect all. You should always respect your opponents, no matter what division you're in, but especially in the advanced division, because these guys, these ladies, whoever they are, they can really hurt you.
Mhm.
And it's very competitive because, you know, they want to win. So going to Nate real quick. So Nate, I want you to kind of talk about your recent. You've been in the advanced category for a while. However, I think recently what you've experienced is there's been an uptick in the competitiveness that you've noticed from the recent competitions that you've been in. And I kind of want you to talk about that and how you're handling that.
Okay. So with competitions and the divisions I'm in, so there's an increase in competitiveness, especially in advance, because and this is personally to me, I feel like I should know what I'm doing, and therefore I should be placing at a competent level. So I should be placing much higher, or at least a little bit higher than the average, because I should be above average. I am advanced. So my form should be crisp, clean, all that. And as for sparring, especially, um, I believe that in sparring, since you have such access to such a wide array of techniques, um, sometimes people want to wow the judges by
Mhm.
using these, jump kicks and spin kicks and whatnot. Um, so I can also say from an anecdotal perspective, um, sometimes you even get like disqualified really quickly just because of how much you want to win, especially because you know that you can win or that you should win
Mhm.
because you are so advanced or that
Mhm.
because you have such extensive knowledge and application.
Mhm.
And so a guy I was sparring, we were going at it, right? He was throwing, thigh kicks and whatnot. I was doing the same thing to him. And this is a part we should learn as advanced competitors too, is control over our emotions and our strength.
Mm.
Because I mean, this is another aspect of learning and perfecting yourself. is that you need to have control over you as a person. So the guy got disqualified, or the guy I was sparring with got disqualified because the judges saw in us that we were not controlling ourselves. So I think that's something to learn about.
Yeah, it can be, as from a judge's perspective, we are tasked with keeping everybody safe. And while we want you guys to express your martial arts, it can be dangerous, especially when somebody starts to lose control. And as much as we can preach to you guys, hey, be better people, be this, be that, sometimes that goes out the window when people are punching you in the face. And if you're not prepared for that, it is super easy to lose control, like Nathaniel said. And next thing you know, you have a dangerous situation. And the last thing we want is anybody getting hurt. I want you guys to compete. I want, any judge will tell you, we want you to compete to your heart's content. We don't want you to be light on each other. We want you to push each other. However, we don't want you to hurt each other in that respect, unless you're doing something like full contact fighting or something like that. That's a little different, which we'll actually talk about that later. So, guys, do you have anything else before we run to our commercial break real quick?
I would like to just touch on what Nate said about controlling your emotions. That's one thing I've noticed no matter what division you're in, when it comes to sparring, when you let your emotions get the best of you, all skill, all technique out the window. And sometimes as the opponent, that can be an advantage because now you've messed them up. Or it could be a disadvantage because now they're mad and they're going to, the respect you go into that competition with then goes out the window. But I think that's something that's very important to be a part of, not just learning, technique and skills, but learning yourself and your emotions and how to control that just as well as your body.
No, we're all martial artists. The biggest enemy that we have is ourselves. Not necessarily the person that's standing across from us, but sometimes it may take years to realize that. And, as we can all say from competing in competition or judging in competition, we can realize that, I'm not, even though this is my opponent, I am my own opponent. I am trying to beat me. I am trying to control me. Yes, I am trying to subdue me.
You got to remember, they're your opponent. They're not your enemy.
Correct. So, guys, we're going to run the commercial break real quick because we got bills to pay. Hey guys, listen, we want to plug a very special business in our local community. This is very dear to our school, Milk Cha-Cha here in beautiful Rock Hill, South Carolina. It's a boba tea shop, one of the only local boba tea shops in the area. And with me, Mr. Nathaniel, his father actually owns the shop. He works there, and then we both have partaken in their boba. It's delicious. Nate, tell us a little bit about Milk Cha-Cha.
So, let me get to the origins of how we got it to Rock Hill. Basically, we found this place called Milk Cha-Cha in, I think up in Fort Mill, or whatever, or somewhere up there. And we liked it so much, we're like, hey, we should, franchise it out here. Because, there's not a whole lot of boba places that you can access from Rock Hill. And so we decided to bring Milk Cha-Cha here. We're located right next to the Adventure Air Force, Cherry Road.
2423 Cherry Road in beautiful Rock Hill, South Carolina. Try Milk Cha-Cha. You can find them on Instagram, Facebook. Milk Cha-Cha. Try it out when you come to Rock Hill. And guys, we're back from commercial break, and I kind of want to talk about the etiquette, the things that you need to do at tournament. Because I think what happens to a lot of people, and when you go to competition, it's not just going and competing. There's a culture there that you kind of adhere to. And for all of us that have been in a lot of tournaments, what are some things that, and we all can kind of just hop in on this, what are some etiquette and some things that we can share with people listening or watching this, that if they're going to go to a competition, what can they do to maybe help their experience be better?
For me, there's a couple different things. If you're a competitor, I say, make sure you take plenty of water. a light snack because you don't want to eat a bunch of food and then go spar. But you need to have something on your stomach. You need to have something to, you know, keep your body functioning properly. Make sure you stretch. Make sure you practice. If you're a spectator, say if you're there helping other students or with your school, make sure and if anybody needs anything, you help them. If you're just spectating, if you're a parent, and you bring children, make sure you're kind of keeping a watch on them so they don't disrupt other I won't say other tournaments, but other rings or other competitors.
Especially when you have weapons involved.
Yes, especially when there's weapons involved. Just kind of be mindful of your surroundings and who's around you and where you're standing because, you know, even though there's a lot of space in between, there's always people around the rings watching. And you have to be careful that you're not stepping inside the rings. You have to be, especially in if someone's sparring, because sometimes those sparring matches get so crazy, those guys get thrown out.
They do.
And you want to make sure that you're not going to get hurt as a spectator or as another competitor just enjoying the tournament. Yeah.
I would definitely say, speaking of weapons, I'm glad you said that because we just had this at a recent tournament. You need to check your weapon. If you're doing any kind of weapons competition, let's say if you're going to do weapons forums or you're going to be showcasing, make sure you check the weapons. We had an individual who was using a 2-section flail and the flail broke and it went into the crowd.
I remember hearing that.
And, it's not, and the funny thing was, it's not like we didn't do a weapon check, but I mean, when you're so jacked up with that much power, you don't realize how hard you may be hitting. And it's easy for things to break and things like that. So always make sure that you do a good weapons check before you bring anything to tournament. And even with your sparring gear, you want to make sure that your sparring gear is quality. Make sure you have a mouthpiece. Make sure you have a cup. Make sure you have a helmet, things that you need. And I like what Bobby said about snacks and having things available to you, but make sure it's healthy snacks. Don't be eating like donuts and honey buns and stuff like that. You want good energy. And also just be prepared to possibly do things at inopportune times. I mean, you have to realize that the people who are planning this event are trying to help it flow and trying to make it go as quickly as possible. And things don't always go according to plan. And so a lot of people who are competing don't understand that you can't always have a schedule. Because as much as you try to have a schedule, things don't go as planned when you're dealing with 1,000+ people.
Yeah.
Things, or one competition goes over and you need to run something else. You don't want one event holding up another event. So you have to make sure that you keep the tournament flowing. And I know that's something that, we have dealt with, but, that's a whole nother podcast that we'll talk about.
I think my biggest pet peeve too is like spectators, like, there's so many children and parents come and they want to see their kids and sometimes they'll bring younger children and you need to be prepared that you may be waiting for hours for an event to come up. So you need to make sure that if you have younger children, you're paying attention to them. You're giving them some kind of activity so they're not running around because you don't want them to get hurt. And because, kids are going to be kids. They're going to get frustrated and bored and all of that. But, you want to be there and support everyone, but you also have to be mindful of who you bring with you and how they're acting because you don't want them to disrupt other competitors or be in the way and get hurt.
Right. What about you, Nate? Anything?
So, in terms of, spectators and whatnot, please make sure that your kids don't run around everywhere because they could be potentially injured by people swinging weapons around, especially like the 2-section flail. That one flying off into the crowd. That could have been your kid that got hit. As for the tournament culture, now I will say, like, interaction with other competitors, for example, you can interact with other people, but just make sure that, they're willing to interact and that they're not trying to remember something or practicing and whatnot, because you may mess up their headspace.
Yeah.
Another thing you want to think about, like, what you need to do too. You need to be making sure that you're prepped for you're prepping for whatever events you may have coming up. So you could be, starting out a tournament and boom, your event's right there. Um, Another thing is whenever rings are not in use and you're practicing on the rings, if someone wants to use the ring as well, let them use it too, because they may need to get their spacing for a form so that they don't run out of bounds and lose points. As for um you also want like people who are designated, especially if you have a bit of a larger school, or maybe you just have multiple students. You want to designate people who can coordinate what you guys do in the sidelines or what you guys are doing while you wait. So you could have one student doing forms and another student who's about to do sparring. So you want to have someone make sure that they're ready, they're prepped to go to sparring, they have all their gear, and that they're stretched out and whatnot. So I think that's why I think the how you should do tournament culture.
No, I think that's good.
Yeah, definitely maybe read the rules ahead of time so
Oh
you
God,
know.
yes. Please read the rules,
Yeah.
people. Let me reiterate that one more time. Read the rules.
Hey.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you have the proper gear, because sometimes it could be a difference of having your fingernails or fingers covered,
Right.
or having them shown, having your fingernails clipped, jewelry, piercings. You just want to be prepared. And I know, like, with us at the Fall Classic, we try to bring extra gear in case somebody needs something, but that's no guarantee that every competition will be like that. So you just want to be aware of what you need, but also be prepared to, if you can't use something, have a backup.
Oh yes.
And also with like what Nate said, if you're coming with a larger school, it's really good to have somebody or maybe several other students who may not be competing, but they could be listening, because, we go in and we try to schedule things a lot, but like you never know if, well, hey, these competitors are busy, so let's throw this competition over here real quick. And you need to be able to have someone that listens and can hear, oh, okay, well, they're going to do, children's sparring or children's forms. So we got to get over there really quickly. And it helps to have somebody that is literally just kind of paying attention to what's going on, because sometimes it can get really loud in there between the sparring and the forms and the cheering of the crowd. It's a lot easier to have somebody that can say, hey, they just called your event,
About rules.
Mm.
Now, from our most recent tournament, I can say that not only do you as a competitor have to read the rules, but the judges also need to read the rules.
I agree with you.
Yes.
So, for example, in my sparring match, for example, head contact for advanced competitors, you are allowed to hit, I believe, was it front of the face, side of the face?
Yep, you were.
Okay. So you can hit the front of the face and the side of the head. However, I got a warning for punching straight to the front of the face. And at the time, I was too afraid to speak out about it, but I knew that you were in the advanced bracket, you were allowed to hit to the front of the face. So I don't know if the judge was maybe it was a lapse of judgment or slip of the mind, or it could have been like a judge, having some kind of bias. So you as a competitor need to know the rules. The judges need to know the rules. And if there's a discrepancy, or if you have some kind of disagreement with the judge, notify, someone like Sifu over here who can rectify this.
Right.
Yeah, because rules can vary from beginner to intermediate to expert level. So if you're not up on the exact rules for each bracket, mistakes can be made
easily. And I'll tell you that from a judge's standpoint, what happens to a lot of people when they get in there, sometimes they revert back to what they may do at their own schools.
Or another tournament.
Or other tournaments, right.
Yeah.
And they have to realize that when you judge at different tournaments, every tournament is different. So as a judge or volunteer or as a coach or a competitor, make sure you read the rules so you understand. And if you have a situation like Nathaniel had, what I've always taught the students now is, listen, you need to advocate for yourself. You can respectfully, maybe you need to call a timeout and say, hey, judge, I've read the rules. This is what it says. And if you're having issues with that judge, yeah, you like you said, go get your coach, go get your seafood so they can rectify that. Or maybe you can ask tournament staff if need be. But a lot of that can be handled before the competition begins.
Yeah.
So as a competitor, my advice to you is to say, hey, let's say like you get your group, you get ready to spar, and you say, hey, can you quickly go through the rules? All right. They go through the rules, and then you hear something that doesn't quite sound right based on what you read. You can say something about that then and get it clarified. So before the competition begins, you can make sure that everybody's on the same page. So if you have a discrepancy, guess what? We've already talked about this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that was something that I thought was great that we did before the Fall Classic is like we tried to put out a lot of videos of rules, and you even gave demonstrations within those videos of things that you should do and shouldn't do. And we would just brainstorm about, okay, do you guys think I forgot anything, or is there anything we need to add? Everything from gear to rules to even scoring. And that was really great. And I feel like, just even if like you've judged before, you never know what can change from year to year. And it's good to just keep up on that as a competitor and as a judge.
I think what a lot of people don't realize, just because you're judging doesn't mean you don't need to be up on your game.
Yeah.
Because even though you're not competing, you are still performing in some way, shape, or form. And as a judge and also as a tournament, promoter now, it is a different world because you want to make sure that you put on a good competition where people enjoy coming.
Yeah.
And you want to try to cut down on, negative experiences as much as
Absolutely.
possible. And once again, the safety of the competitors comes first, but you want people to come and have fun.
Yeah. And then come back. Yeah.
So that's the ultimate goal. But so you kind of talked about some of your personal experiences, Nate, and some of your personal experiences, Bobby. So can you maybe give us some maybe a quick tournament story, something funny, something that maybe helped the people out in YouTube land that maybe you've experienced that you can say, hey, don't be me, or hey, I did this. This worked for me. Be me.
Oh, okay. So I still have tendencies to do this, but back when I was a little more in the intermediate or beginner section or category, when I sparred, I was like really rough. I did not have as much control over myself whenever I sparred my opponents, especially because I was, like much heavier than a lot of other kids. Sometimes I would be striking way too hard or I'd be throwing people and whatnot when I shouldn't be. So don't be like me and start having like a slugfest with people, especially. I even sometimes still do that now where I just kind of throw all my techniques on the window and I just start, trying to grab stuff or swing and whatnot.
Bull in a china shop.
Yeah, bull in a china shop type stuff. Don't do that. You gotta, especially if you're advanced. And I've emphasized this. And sometimes even I don't do it. You should know what you're doing, so act like it.
What about you, Bobby?
Well, I've had the pleasure of not just being a spectator, being a competitor, and also to help run the tournament. And all three are very different experiences. It's fun to just go in and watch, but you really need to be mindful of other people, of competitors, of where you are, what you're doing. Helping run the tournament was really, really fun. The group I was with was really great about, just conferencing and talking together and really, it was so enjoyable to get to watch, especially the younger kids do their forms. I was helping keep score, and it was a little nerve wracking because you got to make sure those things are added up correctly and you put them in the correct order. And it was nice. It was fun to be involved in that way. And as a competitor, oh man, I will say, Quoshu, I loved. Quoshu was amazing experience because I was so nervous about my forms, and I was cocky about my sparring. And I thought that I was gonna tank on forms and kick ass at sparring, and it was actually kind of the opposite, where I went in there on my form and just swamped it. It was amazing. I won gold, and that was such a triumph for me. Whereas in my sparring, I got 4th, and although it was personally a letdown, it helped me to realize that you either win or you learn something. And it really made me have to take a step back and think, okay, you didn't lose, but you need to improve. And this is a chance for me to say, okay, you know, what do I need to work on? And really kind of analyze things and, kind of not necessarily pick apart what I did or didn't do, but where I can improve, how I can better myself so that the next year I go out there, I'm not getting knocked out on a stupid little thigh kick, maybe I put up more of a challenge or I mean, like I said, you either win or you learn something, and I learned a lot that year.
I have so many different tournament stories, but I think one of the funniest ones that I have is my very first tournament was a karate tournament. I had just started doing Ishiru. And my advice to everybody, I know this is going to sound funny, but make sure that you give the judges a name that I guess you would normally use. So, for example, my first name is Jerome, and I have a classmate named Jeremy. Well, the way my name is spelled, it can be spelled or pronounced as Jeremy. And so me and Jeremy are in the same competition, and we're in the same division. And the lady who was calling us up to spar, so me and Jeremy spar. So we compete, whatever. So then Jeremy gets called up again. And then Jeremy gets called up again. And Jeremy keeps getting called up. And I'm like, only one time. When am I going to go again? Well, come to find out that she was pronouncing my name as Jeremy, not Jerome. So it was funny because I'm like, I should have just picked Delmar because that's what I normally go as. And it's very unique. But I kind of chuckle about it now because, you would think something so simple like, oh, everybody knows how to pronounce your name. Yeah. Like, so my name is spelled Jerome.
Oh,
Jeremy.
yeah.
And then Jeremy is usually spelled Jeremy.
Oh, wow.
Or Emie or whatever, Jeremy. So you can spell it a lot of different ways, but when she saw my name, she read it as Jeremy.
The poor kid.
And there was no, and for me, I'm a novice at this, so I'm not like checking in, being like, oh, is that me? Is that, because I'm hearing Jeremy, I'm thinking it's my classmate, and so I didn't have the wherewithal to kind of say, hey, can you check and see what's going on? I didn't say something until after it was over.
I wonder what was going through his head. Like, why do I keep having to go up?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so it was funny because it was one of those things where, we laugh about it till this day. But yeah, that happened to me. And I guess another, quick story is when I did my late time match, and I don't want to go into deep, talk about that because I definitely want to save that for another podcast. Because for those of you who don't know, Lei Tai is basically where you spar on a raised platform. And for those of you who go to Kwoshu, I mean, it can be super intense.
It's amazing.
It is good. Yes, it's good.
incredible.
And now what you're starting to see is people who are taking, at least from the Kung Fu community, or even outside the Kung Fu community, because now we have Muay Thai competitors. You're seeing like boxers and other people who do more full contact sports.
I swear one of those dudes looked like a straight football player.
He probably was.
Huge.
Like they're starting to use competitions like Baltimore as a springboard to bigger tournaments, and we've had somebody there at they used to compete at the Baltimore tournaments. I don't know if you guys remember a guy named Vincent Ming.
That sounds familiar.
You probably seen him. He was an Asian guy. He was always knocking people out with his Taekwondo and his Wing Chun. If I showed you his face, you know who he is.
Okay.
But now he's sparring he's competing on an international level.
Wow.
You know, I mean, like, and I'm saying like big name tournaments,
Yeah.
like sponsors and things like that. And so he's using, like, people are using, you know, competition like Quoshu to springboard to things like that. But anyway, talk about my Lei Tai experience. I did this in 2008, and I never forget my classmate, Stefan Amvane, was like, "Hey, we should do Lei Tai." And I'm like, "What?" And my first teacher, Keone Everton, he wasn't in the area, so Stefan wanted to do it and hide it from Sifu.
How old were you?
I was, okay, let's see, 2008. I was probably 23 or 24.
Okay, still pretty
so
young.
in there, yeah. And so it was funny because, you know, we did all this training, you know, and we were just kind of going based on we were just practicing our kung fu. But, you know, we had to, of course, incorporate the fight training and the stamina training and things like that. And I'll never forget when I got in the ring, my opponent was a gentleman named Robert Beaver. He was one of the advanced students at the Peaceful Dragon at the time, and Robert was really good. Robert had mopped the floor with a few local people that now have actually gone on to be quite the YouTube stars and quite the online presence. But anyway, so it was interesting. I knew Robert and I knew what he could do. And so I was like, oh my goodness. And I never forget like getting in the ring and being across from him and just seeing the eyes. And the eyes just told me, I want to beat the crap out of you. Like you could see it. And it was like, oh, this is real. And so like I'll never forget when he hit me. He hit me. And that's when it clicked. And it was like, oh snap, this is real. I need to defend myself.
I done messed up.
I didn't say I messed up, but it was like you had it was that fight or flight or freeze.
Yeah.
And so it was like, oh snap, if I want to survive this, I better fight back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it was just, I'll just never forget that moment and that feeling. And I do think that did help me be able to deal with confrontation more and dealing with real life situations. So, and we've talked about this before when we did our competition versus street fighting podcast. So look that up. You can find that on our channel. But either way, I think, you know, preparing for competition can help you prepare for real life confrontation. But either way, that was something that I experienced. And
how long were you training at that point?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. So that was 2008. That means I was training for about 5 years.
So just new to being expert.
I had just kind of like got into that. Yeah, I had just kind of gotten to that advanced category.
Yeah, or advanced category.
So it was kind of like, it was a little different. But otherwise than that, I mean, I had a good experience. I'm glad that I did it. I encourage everybody to compete and do those things. So does anybody else have anything they want to, you know, speak on regarding prepare for competition, any other personal experiences, any other advice for our people out in YouTube land and people listening?
I will say if you're ever interested, you know, even if you don't have a kid or someone you know that is competing, especially with the Fall Classic, you know, we love taking volunteers to help out. You can always get involved or you can come spectate. I mean, it is an incredible experience. It's an incredible atmosphere. And you meet a lot of really cool people and you get to see a lot of great martial arts.
Nate, you got anything before we wrap up?
I would like to speak a little bit about my old practicing habits before tournaments. So I was not the greatest of preppers for tournaments back in the day.
You procrastinated.
Yeah, I procrastinated heavy. So I would be like, you know, just taking my time off, and then like a week before tournament, oh crap, I don't know the form. So what my advice for, you know, if you want to get ready for a tournament, it doesn't have to be like, you know, uber training every single day, every hour. take just a little bit of time out of your day to review your forms, or take a look at yourself when you do the form, and see if you can pick up anything you want to improve on, or any habits. And you also want to do this like much in advance before tournament, because you have the eyes of your peers to help you look at your uh glaring mistakes and whatnot. So don't do a me and like procrastinate the crap out of practicing before tournament. Take the opportunity to, and don't even think about like practicing for the sake of tournament. Practice for the sake of continuous self-improvement, because then the tournament, looking good at tournament, will just come naturally.
Yeah, and I will say definitely make sure that whatever you decide to do, you're not trying to be showy for the just trying to do a really amazing form and wow the crowd. Make sure whatever you're doing, you can do it and do it well.
Right.
Like the better you do those stances, or like Nate said, those fundamentals, the better you're going to come out, the better you're going to do, especially when you get more into the intermediate and advanced brackets. Because if you're messing up a simple thing as a bow stance, that's you. By that point, you shouldn't be able to mess that up. You should have that down in a beginner.
I agree.
But even if your form is slightly more simple, if you can do it and do it well, you're going to come off a lot better.
To wrap it up, just show good martial arts.
Yes. Show us
Period.
good kung fu.
That's it. Just show good martial arts. Well, guys, thank you for joining us today. And once again, like, share, subscribe to Martial Mentality. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram at the Northern Shaolin School of Kung Fu. We really appreciate everybody listening. And thank you, Nate, for joining us. Thank you, Bobby. This has been a pleasure. And we are out. Peace.